Helen Price stood in the middle of the round chamber with her hands locked behind her back. The metal cuffs felt cold against her skin. 7 alien judges sat above her in tall chairs. Their shadows fell across the floor like dark fingers pointing at her. She kept her back straight and her eyes forward. She would not show fear, not now, not after everything she had done. The chamber was aboard the biggest ship in the Galactic Coalition fleet. Outside the windows, stars drifted past in silence. Inside, the air felt heavy with judgment. Helen had been a ship captain. She had commanded the Earth vessel Valiant Dawn. She had made a choice that saved lives, but the aliens did not care about that. They only cared about their rules. Admiral Kyle Hart sat in the back of the room watching. His face showed nothing. He had trained Helen years ago when she first joined the space program. He had believed in her. He had pushed her to be better. Now he watched as they prepared to destroy her. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair, but he said nothing. There was nothing he could say that would change what was coming. The lead judge was a creature made of crystal. Light passed through its body and broke into rainbow colors on the walls. It had no face that Helen could read. No eyes that showed mercy or anger. It was called a Zolothian. Its voice came out like the sound of breaking glass. Cold, sharp, final. The Zolothian judge spoke and the words echoed in the chamber. Helen Price was guilty of breaking galactic law. She had interfered with a protected species. She had used advanced medical technology to save human colonists on a planet called Kepler 442b. The colonists were dying from a plague. Without her help, they would all be dead. 400 men, women, and children gone. But Helen had given them the cure. She had saved them all. The coalition said she had no right to do that. They said the colonists were part of an emerging species. Humans were new to space, new to the galaxy. The rules said emerging species had to develop on their own. No help, no interference, even if they died. Especially if they died. That was the law. Helen had broken that law. She had known she was breaking it. She had done it anyway. The faces of those colonists haunted her dreams. The children with fever burning through their small bodies. The parents who begged her for help. The old ones who had given up hope. She could not let them die. She would not. So she had given the order. Her medical officer had transported down to the planet. They had distributed the cure. Within days, the plague was gone. The colonists lived, but someone had reported her. Someone always reported. The coalition had investigators everywhere. They had arrested her. They had stripped her of command. They had brought her here to this chamber to face judgment. The crystal judge announced the sentence. Death by live burial. Helen felt the words hit her like a physical blow. Live burial. They would put her in a box. They would bury her under the ground on a prison moon. She would be alive, awake, unable to move, unable to speak. Alone in the dark forever, or until her body finally gave out and she died. It could take years, decades, maybe longer. This was the old punishment, the ancient way of dealing with traitors. The coalition used it to make examples, to show what happened when someone put individual choice above collective law. Helen would be that example, a warning to anyone who thought about breaking the rules. Someone shouted from the back of the room. It was Danny Walker. He had been her tactical officer on the Valiant Dawn. Young, passionate, loyal. He could not stay quiet. She saved lives, he yelled. How is that a crime? Guards moved toward him, but Admiral Hart raised one hand. The guard stopped. Danny sat back down. His face was red with anger. His hands shook. The judge ignored the outburst. It continued speaking. Humanity was new to the coalition. Perhaps humans did not understand yet. Order had to come before feeling. Rules had to come before compassion. That was how civilization survived. That was how the galaxy stayed peaceful. One person's mercy could not be allowed to threaten the whole system. The sentence was final. No appeals, no delays. They would take Helen to Tarthos 9 tomorrow. They would bury her there. The crystal judge struck its gavel. The sound rang out like a bell. The trial was over. Guards came forward to lead Helen away. She walked between them with her head high. As she passed the observation gallery, she looked at Admiral Hart one last time. He met her eyes. He gave one small nod, so small that only she would see it. It said everything words could not. I am sorry. I tried. I failed. Forgive me, Helen nodded back. She did not blame him. He had done what he could. The coalition was too big, too powerful. too set in its ways. One admiral could not change their minds. One human could not stand against the weight of 1,000 alien worlds. They took her to a holding cell. She sat on the metal bench and stared at the wall. Tomorrow she would be buried. Tomorrow her life would end even though her heart would keep beating. She thought about the colonists. She thought about their faces when the medicine had worked. The joy, the relief, the tears of gratitude. She had saved them. That had to mean something, even if it meant her own destruction. Outside her cell, the coalition ship continued its journey through space. The galaxy turned, stars died and were born, and Helen Price waited for the morning that would take her into the ground, into the darkness, into a living death that would last until her mind finally broke or her body finally stopped. She closed her eyes and tried to remember what the sun looked like, what fresh air felt like, what freedom meant. Tomorrow those memories would be all she had left. The transport ship dropped through the thick purple clouds of Tarthos 9. Helen sat strapped into her seat watching through the small window. The moon's surface came into view below. Nothing but rocks and craters, gray and lifeless. No trees, no water. No sign that anything had ever lived there. This was where they buried their criminals. This was where she would spend eternity. Dr. Nina Ford entered the holding area. She carried a medical scanner in her hands. Her eyes were red, but she kept her voice steady. She had been crying. Helen could tell. Nina was required to do a final health check before the burial. It was protocol. Someone had to make sure the prisoner was healthy enough to survive in stasis for years. Helen told Nina it was okay. She did not need to apologize for doing her job. Nina ran the scanner over Helen's body. The device hummed softly. All vital signs were strong. Heart rate normal. Blood pressure good. No diseases. No problems. Helen's body was perfect, ready to be locked away forever. Nina's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is barbaric," she said. "I do not care what their laws say." "This is wrong." Helen looked at her friend. She thanked her for caring. But it was done. The decision had been made. Helen had known the cost when she saved those colonists. She had known what would happen if she got caught. She had done it anyway. The transport landed with a soft thud. Guards came to escort Helen off the ship. They walked through corridors carved into the moon's rock. The walls were smooth and cold. Lights flickered overhead. They went deeper and deeper underground. Finally, they reached a massive chamber. Hundreds of glass coffins lined the walls. Each one held a prisoner. Helen could see them as she walked past. Their eyes were open. Their bodies were still. They were aware, trapped, frozen in time but conscious. Some of them had been here for decades. She could see it in their eyes. The madness, the despair, the endless screaming that no one could hear. Her coffin waited in the center of the room. It was made of clear material, clean, empty, ready. Helen walked to it without being forced. She climbed inside and lay down. The material was cold against her back. Restraints moved automatically. They wrapped around her wrists and ankles, around her chest and forehead. She could not move. Captain Luis Mendoza stepped forward. He was human. They had chosen a human to carry out the sentence. It was a message to Earth. No one was above coalition law, not even their own people. Luis had a good record. He followed orders. He did his duty. But Helen could see the pain in his eyes. He did not want to do this. Luis spoke the formal words. "Commander Helen Price, you are hereby committed to eternal imprisonment. May you find wisdom in your solitude." His voice cracked slightly on the last word. Helen wanted to tell him it was not his fault. But the coffin lid was already closing. The stasis field activated. Helen felt a tingling sensation spread through her body. It started in her fingers and toes, then moved up her arms and legs, into her chest, her neck, her face. Within seconds she could not move at all, not even blink. Her heart slowed, 1 beat per minute. Her breathing became so shallow that it was almost nothing. But her mind stayed sharp. Wide awake, fully aware, they lifted the coffin. 6 guards carried it through tunnels that went even deeper into the moon. Down and down. The lights became fewer. The walls became rougher. Finally, they reached an empty chamber. A hole had been carved into the wall. They placed Helen's coffin inside. They activated a force field across the opening. Then they began filling the chamber. Machines pumped compressed rock and earth into the space. Helen watched as the material poured in. It covered the floor, rose higher, reached the level of her coffin, kept going. Soon she could see nothing but brown and gray pressing against the glass. Then even that disappeared. Total darkness. Complete silence. Helen was buried alive. The weight of the moon pressed down on her. She could not move, could not speak, could not scream. She could only think, only feel, only exist in the black emptiness that would be her world from now on. Time became strange. Without light or sound or movement, Helen could not tell if seconds were passing or hours. She tried counting her heartbeats. 1 per minute, 60 per hour. But she lost track, started over, lost track again. Her mind began playing tricks on her. She saw things in the darkness, faces, shapes, memories that felt more real than reality. She thought about the colonists. She pictured their faces, the mother who had held her sick daughter, the old man who had shaken Helen's hand with tears running down his face, the teenager who had wanted to be a pilot someday. They were alive because of her. They were living their lives, having experiences, feeling the sun, breathing fresh air. That had to mean something. It had to. Helen recited everything she could remember. Books she had read, movies she had watched, conversations she had had with friends, anything to keep her mind occupied, anything to prevent the madness she had seen in the eyes of the other prisoners. She would not break. She would not let this destroy her. She had made her choice. She would live with it, even if living meant existing in endless darkness. Days passed. Maybe weeks. Helen could not tell. She went through every memory she had, every story, every song. She replayed her entire life from beginning to end. Then she did it again, and again. The darkness pressed in. The silence was absolute. She was alone in a way that no human should ever be alone. Then one day something changed. Helen felt a vibration, faint at first, then stronger. The rock around her coffin was moving, shifting. Something was happening. Something was coming through the compressed earth above her. Light appeared. Actual light. It pierced through the darkness like a knife. Helen wanted to cry, but her eyes could not make tears. The stasis field would not allow it. A shape appeared above her. A person, a human. He was digging through the rock, coming toward her. Helen's mind raced. Was this real? Or had she finally gone mad? Was she imagining this? But the vibrations continued. The light grew brighter. And then she saw his face clearly. A man, strong features, dark eyes. He was real. He was here. He was coming for her. The man knelt beside Helen's coffin. He wore combat armor with earth symbols on it. But there were other markings, too. Symbols Helen recognized from history books. Choctaw symbols. Native American designs that spoke of a culture thousands of years old. The man's hands moved quickly over the coffin's control panel. His fingers were steady, confident. He knew what he was doing. "Hold on, Commander," he said softly. "I am getting you out." His voice was calm, strong, like he had done this 100 times before. Like digging through solid rock to rescue a buried prisoner was just another day. Helen could not respond, could not move, could not even blink. But she heard him. She understood. Someone had come for her. The man kept talking as he worked. "You are probably wondering how I found you," he said, "or why. Truth is, you saved my sister. She was one of those colonists on Kepler 442b. My niece, too. Little Amy was 6 years old when that plague hit. You gave them the cure. You gave them life. My people, the Choctaw, we understand debt. We understand honor." His name was Jacob Blackwater, Sergeant Jacob Blackwater. He had spent months planning this rescue, months gathering equipment, months studying the prison moon's security, all because Helen had saved his family, all because his culture taught him that some debts must be paid. No matter the cost, no matter the risk, the coffin locks disengaged. Helen heard the hiss of releasing pressure. The stasis field deactivated. Sensation flooded back into her body like fire. She gasped. Her lungs expanded fully for the first time in 3 years. 3 years! She had been buried for 3 years. It had felt like forever and no time at all. Her fingers twitched. Her toes moved. She could feel again. Jacob helped her sit up. He supported her weight as her muscles remembered how to work. "Easy, Commander," he said. "Your body needs time to adjust." Helen tried to speak, but her voice came out as a croak, rough and broken from years of silence. She managed one word. You. Jacob smiled. It was a fierce smile, full of determination and pride. He handed her a water container. Helen drank deeply. The water was cold and clean. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever tasted. As strength returned to her arms, she looked at Jacob with new understanding. You broke coalition law to come here, she said. They will bury you too. Her voice was getting stronger now, clearer. Jacob just shrugged. My ancestors walked the trail of tears, he said. They survived what should have killed them. They taught us that some things matter more than rules made by people who do not understand honor. You saved my family. That is a debt I carry. Helen wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he should not have risked this. But she knew it would be pointless. She could see it in his eyes. This was not just about debt. This was about doing what was right, about standing up against injustice, about proving that one person could make a difference. Jacob gave her clothes. Real clothes. Not a prison uniform, tactical gear that fit perfectly. He had thought of everything. As Helen changed, she asked about the ship. How are they getting off this moon? Jacob explained that friends were waiting. A ship hidden in a canyon 40 kilometers away. They had a rover ready at the surface. But they needed to move fast. Alarms suddenly blared through the underground complex. Red lights flashed in the tunnels. The coalition had found the breach. They knew someone had broken in. Security drones would be coming. Lots of them. Jacob checked his rifle. We need to move now, he said. They ran through the tunnels. Jacob led the way. He had memorized the route. Every turn, every corridor. Behind them, Helen could hear the whine of drones. The mechanical sound of coalition security activating. They were being hunted. Jacob pointed ahead to a vertical shaft. That is our exit, he said. 300 meters straight up. Helen looked at the shaft. Then at Jacob. You first, she said. If they catch us, I want you to have a chance to escape. But Jacob refused. Not happening, Commander. I came here to save you. That is what I am doing. A drone came around the corner, its weapons charged with a high-pitched whine. Jacob spun and fired. His plasma rifle turned the drone into melting metal. But the shot would alert others. More would come. Both of us then, Helen said. Together. Jacob nodded. Together. They climbed, hand over hand, grip after grip. Helen's muscles screamed. Her body was still weak from 3 years of immobility, but she climbed anyway. She climbed because this man had risked everything for her. She climbed because those colonists deserved to know their sacrifice had been honored. She climbed because giving up was not in her nature. Drones filled the shaft below them. Energy blasts scorched the walls. Rock exploded into fragments. But Jacob had planned for this too. Every 50 meters, a device activated. Electromagnetic pulses that disabled the drones temporarily. It gave them time. Precious seconds to keep climbing. Helen's arms burned. Her fingers were raw. Her legs shook with exhaustion. But she kept going. Jacob climbed beside her, encouraging her, telling her how far they had come, how close they were. His voice kept her focused, kept her moving. They burst through the surface hatch. Tarthos 9's thin atmosphere hit Helen's face. The purple sky stretched overhead. A rover sat waiting. Its engine was running. Behind the controls was a young woman. She had pilot wings tattooed on her neck. Her eyes were fierce and bright. About time, Sarge, she said. We have coalition fighters inbound. 4 minutes. Her name was Casey Wright. She was a lieutenant. She was also part of Jacob's rescue team, part of the group that believed Helen deserved freedom. Then let us not be here in 3, Jacob said as they jumped into the rover. Punch it. Casey hit the accelerator. The rover shot forward. Purple dust kicked up behind them. They raced across the barren landscape. Casey drove like she was born behind the wheel, weaving between rocks, jumping over craters. The rover's engine screamed. The ship is cloaked in the canyon, Casey called back. But once we lift off, every coalition vessel in the sector will be on us. Jacob smiled. I have a plan for that, he said. Helen looked at him. You have planned for everything else. I should not be surprised. Jacob's smile grew wider. My grandmother always said to prepare for the worst, hope for the best, and trust your brothers and sisters to stand beside you. We have a lot of both waiting for us. Helen did not know what he meant, but she trusted him. This man had pulled her from a living grave. He had given her back her life. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The ship was called the Spirit Walker. It sat hidden in a deep canyon, its hull painted to blend with the rocks. As the rover approached, Helen could see it was a modified Earth corvette. But alien technology had been added to it. Strange devices attached to the hull, weapons that did not look human. This was something new, something the Coalition had never seen before. They jumped out of the rover and ran up the boarding ramp. Inside, the ship was busy with activity. Crew members rushed to their stations. But Helen noticed something strange. The crew was not all human. There were aliens, too. Species she recognized as Coalition outcasts, beings who had been exiled or rejected. They worked alongside the humans like they had been doing it for years. The bridge was at the front of the ship. A woman stood at the command station. She was in her 50s with gray streaks in her dark hair. Her eyes were sharp. Her stance was that of someone who had seen too much combat and lived to tell about it. She turned as Helen entered. "Commander Price," the woman said. "Welcome aboard. I'm Captain Rita Boone. Strap in. This is going to get rough." Her voice left no room for argument. Helen found a seat and buckled in. Jacob sat beside her. Casey took the pilot's position. Her hands danced over the controls. The Spirit Walker lifted off. Its engines roared. The canyon walls blurred as they shot upward. They broke through the atmosphere in seconds. The purple sky gave way to black space, and there, waiting for them, were Coalition fighters. At least a dozen of them, maybe more. They had been expecting this. "Coalition Command is hailing us," said a young man at the communication station. His name was Chris Palmer. He looked nervous. "They are ordering us to power down and prepare to be boarded." Rita smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Tell them we are experiencing communication difficulties," she said, and ready the jump drive, Helen stood up. "You cannot jump from inside a planetary system," she said. "The gravitational interference will tear the ship apart." She knew this. Every pilot knew this. Jumping to faster-than-light travel required being far from any large gravity wells. Trying it here was suicide. Rita turned to her. "Normally, yes," she said. "But we have something special." "Jacob, show her." Jacob pulled up a holographic display in the center of the bridge. It showed a device Helen had never seen before. Strange patterns of energy. Alien mathematics that hurt to look at. 3 months ago, Jacob said, humanity made first contact with a species the Coalition tried to exterminate. They are called the Nokari. They are telepathic. They have been hiding in the outer reaches of the galaxy for thousands of years. Turns out they are very interested in humanity's tendency to reject unjust authority. The device in the hologram rotated. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. "That is Nokari technology," Jacob continued. "It creates a stable bubble of normal space around the ship, allows for safe system jumps. The Coalition does not know it exists." Helen stared at the device. This changed everything. If humans had this technology, they could go anywhere, do anything. The Coalition's control was based on their monopoly of jump points and safe routes. This made all of that irrelevant. "And they are sharing this with us?" Helen asked. "Why?" A new voice answered. A voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "We share it with anyone willing to stand against tyranny." Helen turned and saw something impossible. An alien stood in the doorway. But it was not entirely there. Its form was translucent. Like it existed slightly out of phase with normal reality. "I am Speaker Vane," the being said. "I am Nokari. Commander Price, your act of compassion resonated across the telepathic networks. You proved that humanity values life over law when the law becomes unjust. We have been watching your species. You are young, aggressive, stubborn, but you have something rare in the galaxy. You have hope." The Coalition fighters opened fire. Plasma bolts streaked through space. The Spirit Walker's shields flared as the weapons hit. The ship shook. Alarms blared. But Rita stood calm at her station. "Jump drive charged," Casey called out. "Course laid in for the rendezvous point." Rita nodded. "Do it." Reality twisted. Helen felt the universe fold around them. Space bent in ways that should not be possible. Colors that did not exist flashed past the windows. Her stomach lurched. Her head spun. And then they were somewhere else. Somewhere far from Tarthos 9, somewhere safe. Helen looked out the window and gasped. Dozens of ships floated in space around them. No, not dozens, hundreds, human vessels. Nokari ships that looked like they were made of light. Other designs she could not identify. They were all here, all together, all waiting. "Welcome to the Alliance," Jacob said quietly. "We are building something new out here, Commander. A coalition of the willing. where compassion matters more than compliance. Helen could not speak, could not process what she was seeing. This was impossible. The coalition controlled everything. They had the power, the ships, the weapons. How could anyone stand against them? How many, she finally asked. 2,000 ships so far, Rita answered. 50 species. All of them rejected by the coalition for one reason or another. All of them ready to prove that there is a better way. Helen looked at the fleet, at the impossible gathering of rebels and outcasts, at the hope that refused to die. And they are here because of me, she asked. Speaker Vane's translucent form moved closer. You were the spark, the Nokari said. But the fire was always waiting to be lit. Humanity has a gift, Commander. You call it stubbornness. You call it defiance. We call it hope. The ability to look at impossible odds and say no. The willingness to risk everything for what is right. That is rare. That is precious. A communication came through. It was a general broadcast from the command ship of the Alliance fleet. They were calling all ship captains to a meeting. Rita looked at Helen. You should come, she said. They will want to meet you. Helen shook her head. I am not a captain anymore. I am a criminal. A fugitive. Jacob put his hand on her shoulder. You are a symbol, he said. You are the reason half these ships are here. The reason people started questioning the coalition. Whether you like it or not, you matter. Helen looked at the faces around her. At Rita, at Casey, at Chris, at Speaker Vane, at Jacob. They believed in her. They had risked everything to save her. The least she could do was face what came next. All right, she said. Let us see what this alliance is about. They took a shuttle to the command ship. It was massive. Built from salvaged coalition technology and human ingenuity combined. The New Dawn, they called it. A symbol of a fresh start, of a new way forward. Inside, representatives from dozens of species gathered. They all turned as Helen entered. Some nodded. Some saluted. Some just stared. She was the woman who had been buried alive. The human who had chosen mercy over law. The spark that had started all of this. She walked to the center of the room and the meeting began. The conference room was packed with beings from across the galaxy. Helen stood near the center, still trying to process everything that had happened. Hours ago, she had been buried alive. Now she was free, surrounded by rebels and outcasts who had built an entire fleet in secret. It felt like a dream. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood at the head of the room. He was the highest-ranking Earth military officer in the Alliance. Gray-haired and serious, he commanded respect without needing to demand it. He activated a holographic display showing Coalition space. The Coalition has issued a galaxy-wide warrant for Commander Price's arrest, he said. They are calling her escape an act of terrorism. They are threatening sanctions against Earth if we do not turn her over. Murmurs spread through the room, some angry, some worried, all of them focused on Helen. Let them threaten, growled a voice from the back. A massive reptilian creature stood up. His name was Krell. He was Draxi. His species had been forced from their homeworld by the Coalition. They threatened my people too, forced us to abandon our planet because we refused to conscript our children into their military. I say let them come. The issue is not the threats, Helen said. Her voice was quiet, but everyone stopped to listen. The issue is that the Coalition still believes it has the moral authority to make them. We need to change that narrative. She moved to the holographic display, gestured to the map of Coalition space. They control the information networks. Any message we send will be labeled propaganda. General Lisa Chang nodded. She commanded Alliance ground forces. She was tough and practical. So how do we reach people, she asked. How do we tell our story when they control all the channels? Helen turned to Speaker Vane. The Nokari had been standing silent in the corner, its translucent form barely visible. Can your people broadcast directly into the minds of every sentient being in Coalition space? Helen asked. The room went silent. Everyone understood what she was suggesting. The Nokari were telepaths. They could reach across light years with their minds, touch billions of consciousness at once. It was an incredible power, and a dangerous one. Speaker Vane's form flickered. Theoretically, yes, the Nokari said, but such an act would be considered an invasion of mental privacy. It would itself be a violation of Coalition law. Helen stepped closer to the alien. They buried me alive for saving lives, she said. I think we are past worrying about their laws. I am not talking about mind control. I am not talking about manipulation. I am talking about the truth. She looked around the room, meeting eyes with human and alien alike. Let every being in the galaxy see what happened on Kepler 442b. Let them see the children who would have died without intervention. Let them see me being sentenced to eternal torment for showing mercy. Let them decide for themselves what justice looks like. Do not tell them what to think. Just show them what happened. Let them make their own choice. Jacob stood up. My people have oral traditions that go back thousands of years, he said. We know the power of a story told well. The commander is right. We need to show them, not tell them. Let them experience what she experienced. Then they can judge. Admiral Brooks rubbed his jaw. It is risky, he said. The coalition could interpret it as an attack. Respond with military force. Rita Boone pulled up intelligence reports on the display. They are already preparing for war, she said. Our scouts report fleet movements toward Alliance space. They are going to come for us regardless. We might as well make sure everyone knows why. The debate continued for an hour. Some worried about the ethics of telepathic broadcasting. Others worried about coalition retaliation. But slowly a consensus formed. They would do it. They would tell Helen's story. Let the galaxy see the truth. Let every being decide for themselves which side was right. The vote was called. Species by species, the representatives cast their decision. When it was done, the result was unanimous. Helen would tell her story. Speaker Vane and the Nakari would broadcast it across the galaxy. Let the coalition try to spin that. They spent 3 days preparing. Helen recorded everything. She spoke about the plague on Kepler 442b, about the desperate colonists who had begged for help, about her decision to give them the cure, about the trial, about the crystal judge who valued order over life, about the coffin, about the darkness. About 3 years of being buried alive, she spoke calmly. Without anger, without bitterness, she just presented the facts. Let them speak for themselves. The technicians captured every word, every expression, every emotion. They would need it all for the broadcast. On the 4th day, Speaker Vane gathered 6 other Nakari telepaths. They met in a meditation chamber at the center of the new dawn. The room was quiet, peaceful. Helen sat with them, opened her mind. Let them see her memories. Let them feel what she had felt. Are you ready? Speaker Vane asked. Helen took a deep breath. She thought about the colonists, about Jacob's sister and niece, about all the beings in the galaxy who suffered under unjust laws, about the chance to make a difference, to change things, to prove that compassion mattered. Yes, she said. Let them see. The Nakari minds expanded. Helen felt it like a wave washing over her. Their consciousness touched hers, gentle but powerful. They took her memories, her experiences, her truth, and then they reached out, across space, across light years, across the vast distances that separated worlds. Every sentient being in coalition space suddenly saw through Helen's eyes, felt what she felt, understood her choice. Billions of minds experienced the same moment. The dying children on Kepler 442b, the gratitude of the colonists, the cold judgment of the tribunal, the terror of being buried alive, the 3 years of darkness and silence, the rescue, the hope. Helen sat in the meditation chamber and felt the galaxy respond. She could not read minds like the Nakari, but she could sense the shift, the change. The moment when billions of beings questioned everything they had been told, when they wondered if maybe, just maybe, the rules were wrong, when they considered that compassion might matter more than order. The broadcast lasted only minutes. But in those minutes, everything changed. The Nakari telepath slowly withdrew from Helen's mind. She opened her eyes. Speaker Vane looked at her with something that might have been approval. It is done, the Nakari said. Now we wait to see how the galaxy responds. Helen stood on shaky legs. She felt drained, empty, like the broadcast had taken something from her, but also lighter, free. She had told her truth. The rest was up to everyone else. Jacob was waiting outside the meditation chamber. He caught her as she stumbled. Easy, Commander, he said. That was the bravest thing I have ever seen. Helen looked at him. I just told the truth. That is all. Jacob smiled. Sometimes that is the bravest thing of all. The response came faster than anyone expected. Within hours of the broadcast, protests erupted on 100 worlds. Beings who had quietly accepted coalition authority for generations suddenly questioned everything. They gathered in city squares. They marched through government districts. They demanded answers. They demanded change. On Earth, people flooded the streets. Every major city saw demonstrations, not violent, just determined. Millions of humans standing together, supporting Helen Price, supporting the Alliance, supporting the idea that compassion should matter more than blind obedience to rules. The coalition ambassadors were expelled from human space. The Earth government made an announcement that shocked the galaxy. They were withdrawing from the coalition, joining the Alliance instead. But not everyone was swayed by Helen's story. The coalition's core worlds did not change their minds. The species who benefited most from the existing power structure saw the broadcast as an attack, as propaganda, as emotional manipulation. They doubled down on their support for coalition law. For order above all else, the Zolothian Empire was the most vocal. They had written many of the coalition's laws. Their crystalline civilization valued logic and structure above emotion. To them, Helen's story was irrelevant. She had broken the law. She had been punished. That was justice. The broadcast was simply an attempt to undermine centuries of carefully built galactic order. Fleet Commander Zrath was put in charge of the coalition's military response. He was Zolothian, cold, calculating, utterly convinced of his righteousness. He addressed his armada before they departed. "These rebels have violated the sanctity of mind itself," he said. "They have poisoned billions with their emotional manipulation. We will crush them. We will restore order. Failure is not acceptable." 300 coalition warships jumped into Alliance space. They came in formation, weapons charged, shields at maximum. They meant to end this rebellion quickly, to show the galaxy what happened when you challenged the established order. Admiral Brooks watched them appear on the tactical display. His face was grim. "We are outnumbered 3-1, he said. The bridge of the New Dawn was tense, quiet. Everyone knew what was coming. But we have surprise on our side. The coalition does not know about our Nokari shield technology. They do not know we can jump from inside a star system. They think they understand our capabilities. They are wrong." Jacob stood at the weapons station. His hands were steady on the controls. "We also have something they do not," he said. "We know what we are fighting for. They are fighting to maintain power. We are fighting for the right to show mercy, to save lives, to choose compassion. That makes all the difference." The fleets closed on each other. The space between stars became a battlefield. Coalition dreadnoughts opened fire first. Massive plasma cannons that could melt through armor like paper. Energy beams that could vaporize a ship in seconds. Missile swarms that filled space with explosive death. It was overwhelming firepower, designed to crush resistance before it could organize. But the Alliance ships did not fight like the coalition expected. They did not form defensive lines. They did not try to match firepower with firepower. Instead, they moved, danced, weaved between the incoming fire like leaves in the wind. The Nokari shields absorbed what they could not dodge. The ships were smaller, faster, more maneuverable. They turned the coalition's size advantage into a weakness. Helen stood next to Admiral Brooks. She was not a combat officer. Her expertise was in exploration and first contact, but she understood tactics. She could see the battle developing. "The coalition fleet is trying to overwhelm us with firepower," she said, "but we cannot win that way. We need to target their command and control. If we can disable Zrath's flagship, the rest of the fleet will fall into disarray." Rita Boone looked up from her station. "Easier said than done," she said. "That ship is the most heavily defended vessel in their fleet. Nothing is going to get through those shields." Helen thought for a moment. "Then we need a distraction. Something they are not expecting. Something that will make them hesitate." She turned to Speaker Vane. The Nokari was standing silently at the edge of the bridge, observing, processing. "Can your people create a telepathic illusion?" Helen asked. "Make them see something that is not there?" Speaker Vane's form flickered. "That would be deception." "We do not lie, not a lie," Helen said quickly. "A possibility. Show Zrath what will happen if he continues this path. More death. More suffering. The collapse of the coalition itself. Show him the truth of where this war leads. Show him what his victory will cost. That is not a lie. That is foresight." Speaker Vane was silent for a long moment. The battle raged around them. Ships exploded. People died. The universe waited. Finally, the Nokari spoke. "That is not deception. That is showing probable futures. Very well, we will do this. The Nokari telepaths focused their power on Zrath's mind, reached across space to touch the consciousness of the fleet commander. Helen did not know exactly what they showed him, but she saw the result on the tactical display. The Coalition flagship suddenly stopped firing. Its formation broke. Other ships, confused by their commander's silence, hesitated. On the bridge of his dreadnought, Zrath staggered. His crystalline structure flickered wildly. Colors flashed through his body. He saw it all. Saw the war continue. Saw systems burning. Saw species driven to extinction. Saw the Coalition fragment into 100 warring factions. Saw civilization itself collapse. Saw himself at the center of it. Alone. Broken. The architect of galactic ruin. And he saw his face in the ruins. Saw his legacy. Not as a defender of order, but as the fool who destroyed everything trying to preserve it. The vision was so clear. So real. So absolutely certain. Zrath knew probability. Knew how to calculate outcomes. This was not manipulation. This was mathematics. This was truth. His hand trembled as he reached for the communication controls. All ships, he said. His voice was different, quieter, almost broken. Cease fire. Stand down. His second officer turned to him in shock. Commander, we have them on the defensive. If we press the attack, we can end this now. Zrath's crystalline form seemed to dim, lose some of its inner light. I said stand down. I have seen where this path leads. We end this now. Or we end everything. The confusion spread through the Coalition fleet. Ships stopped firing, waited for orders, for clarification. The battle, which had been raging moments before, suddenly fell silent. Helen let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. The Alliance ships held their positions, ready to fight if needed, but hoping they would not have to. The silence stretched, seconds became minutes, and slowly the Coalition fleet began to withdraw. Not in defeat, not in surrender, but in recognition that this was not a battle they should be fighting. Admiral Brooks turned to Helen. You did it, he said. You stopped a war. Helen shook her head. Speaker Vane stopped a war. I just asked the right question. But inside she felt something shift. The galaxy was changing. Right here. Right now. Because people had chosen to see truth instead of just following orders. The future was uncertain. The Coalition would not simply give up. But for now there was hope. The ceasefire held, but nobody believed it would last forever. Zrath agreed to meet with Alliance leadership on neutral ground. A small moon orbiting a yellow star. No weapons, no armies. Just representatives from both sides. Talking. Trying to find a path forward that did not lead to galactic war. Helen insisted on being part of the Alliance delegation. Admiral Brooks tried to argue against it. You are too close to this, he said. Too personal. Zrath sentenced you to live burial. How can you negotiate with him? But Helen was firm. That is exactly why I need to be there, she said. This is not about revenge. This is about building something better. If I cannot face him, then what hope do we have for real peace? Jacob stood beside her as always. Rita came too. Speaker Vane agreed to attend as a neutral observer. Admiral Brooks led the delegation. They took a small shuttle down to the moon's surface. The meeting place was a simple dome. Transparent walls that let in the light of the yellow sun. A table, chairs, nothing else. Zrath arrived with his own delegation. Others Lothian officials, a Thorian diplomat known for mediation, a Vex military advisor. They entered the dome from the opposite side. For a moment, the two groups just stared at each other. Enemies. Opponents. Beings who had been trying to kill each other hours before. Zrath's crystalline form was dimmer than Helen remembered, like something inside him had broken during the vision the Nokari had shown him. When he saw Helen, he stopped walking, stood perfectly still. His light flickered in patterns that Helen could not read. You are the one, he said. His voice sounded different, less like breaking glass, more like wind chimes, sad and musical, the one I sentenced to eternal darkness. Helen nodded, I am. She kept her voice neutral, not angry, not accusing, just stating fact. I saw what my judgment created, Zrath said. I saw the galaxy burn because I confused order with justice. His form flickered again, dimmer. How do you not hate me? The question hung in the air. Everyone waited for Helen's answer. She thought for a moment, remembering the darkness, the 3 years of silence, the madness that had nearly taken her. I did it first, she said finally. In the darkness, I had nothing but my thoughts. Some of those thoughts were very dark, but hatred takes energy. I realized I needed that energy for something more important, understanding why we were both in that position to begin with. She stepped closer to Zrath. Your people value order because chaos nearly destroyed you thousands of years ago. I studied your history. The Great Fracture, when your world nearly tore itself apart. You built the coalition to ensure that never happened again. That is not evil. That is trauma trying to protect itself. Zrath's light brightened slightly. You studied us. You understand us. And yet I hurt you. I hurt countless others, all in the name of protection. His voice carried something Helen had never heard from a Zolothian before. Grief. Yes, Helen said simply. You did. And now you have a choice. You can continue down that path. Or you can help build something better. The negotiations lasted 3 days. They were difficult. There were arguments, moments when it seemed like everything would collapse. But slowly, painfully, a framework emerged. Not a treaty, not a surrender, something new. They called it the Galactic Concordat. The idea was simple but revolutionary. Instead of one coalition imposing rules on everyone, there would be shared principles, universal standards that every species agreed to. No genocide, no slavery, no punishment without the possibility of redemption. But beyond those basic standards, each species would govern itself, make its own choices, live according to its own values. Species that wanted to maintain strict order could do so. Species that valued individual freedom could embrace that. The Concordat would not judge, would not impose. It would simply ensure that the universal principles were upheld. Everything else was up to each civilization to decide. General Lisa Chang raised an important point. What about enforcement, she asked. What happens when someone breaks the universal principles? Who decides, who acts? The question sparked another round of debate. Finally, Rita Boone suggested a solution. A council made up of representatives from every species. Decisions would require consensus, not majority vote. Complete consensus. It would be slow, sometimes frustrating, but it would prevent any one species from dominating. The coalition as it had existed would dissolve. Its massive bureaucracy, its rigid laws, its enforcement fleets, all of it would end. Something new would rise from the ashes, something built on cooperation rather than control, on principles rather than rules, on trust rather than fear. Zrath was the first to sign the Concordat document. His crystalline hand trembled as he placed his mark. I do not know if this will work, he said, but I know the old way was leading to destruction. I saw it. We must try something new. One by one, the other representatives signed. Human, Nokari, Draxi, Thorian, Vex, dozens of species. All choosing hope over fear. When it was done, Helen looked at the document. Her name was there. Commander Helen Price, the woman who had been buried alive for showing mercy. Now a founding member of the Galactic Concordat, life had a strange sense of poetry sometimes. They returned to their ships. The news spread quickly. Some celebrated, some were skeptical, some were angry that the old order was ending. But change had begun. There was no stopping it now. On Earth, Helen was treated like a hero. Parades filled the streets when she arrived home. People wanted to touch her, thank her, tell her their stories. The colonists from Kepler 442b came to see her. Jacob's sister held Helen's hands. Tears ran down her face. You saved us, she whispered. You saved all of us. My daughter is alive because of you. She is 12 now. She wants to be a doctor. She wants to help people like you helped us. Helen looked at the young girl standing beside her mother. Amy, 6 years old when the plague had hit, now 12 and full of dreams. This is why I did it, Helen thought. This is what matters. Not laws or rules or orders, but this child, this life, this future. The president of Earth held a ceremony, awarded Helen the Medal of Valor, the highest honor the planet could give. But Helen refused to accept it alone. She brought Jacob onto the stage with her. This man, she told the crowd, embodied everything that makes humanity special. He saw an injustice and he acted. He risked everything, not for glory, not for recognition, but because his heart told him it was right. She turned to Jacob. His ancestors survived the trail of tears, horrors that should have broken them. But they endured. They taught him that some debts transcend law. That kindness is not weakness. That one person's courage can change everything. You came for me when I was buried alive in disgrace. You pulled me from darkness. You gave me back my life. But more than that, you showed the galaxy what it means to be human. Jacob smiled. That same fierce smile from the tunnels of Tarthos 9. My grandmother used to say we are all related, he said. You saved my family, Commander. That made you my family, and family does not leave family behind. The crowd erupted in applause. But Helen barely heard it. She was thinking of all the beings across the galaxy who had seen her story, who had questioned their governments, who had demanded change. She was thinking of the new Concordat, fragile but full of possibility. Most of all, she was thinking of the children, on Kepler 442b and 1,000 other worlds, children who would grow up in a galaxy that valued compassion, that recognized mercy, that understood that sometimes the right choice was also the hard choice. They were the future. They were what all of this had been for. 6 months after the Concordat was signed, Helen received an offer that surprised her. The new galactic government wanted her to command their first joint species exploration vessel, a ship that would venture into unknown regions of the galaxy, discover new worlds, make first contact with species that had never met the Coalition or the Concordat. It would be a symbol, proof that different species could work together, that the future could be better than the past. The ship was called the Unity. It was beautiful. Sleek human engineering combined with alien technology. Nokari phase shields, Draxi weapon systems, Zelothian navigation computers, Thorian medical bays. Everything the galaxy had to offer, working together in one vessel. Helen walked through its corridors and felt hope. Real solid hope. Jacob was named her first officer. He accepted without hesitation. Where you go, I go, he said. We started this journey together. We finish it together. The crew was drawn from dozens of worlds, young beings who believed in the Concordat, who wanted to explore rather than conquer, who valued discovery over dominance. Casey Wright signed on as chief pilot. Chris Palmer became communications officer. Rita Boone took a position as tactical advisor. Even Speaker Vane agreed to join the crew. The Nokari rarely left their hidden worlds, but the Unity represented something they wanted to support, a future where telepaths were not feared, where difference was celebrated rather than suppressed. The launch ceremony was held at Earth's orbital shipyard. Representatives from every Concordat species attended. Zrath was there. His crystalline form was brighter now, healing. He had resigned from military command, taken a position as a mediator instead, helping resolve disputes between species, using his experience with rigid order to understand why flexibility mattered. He approached Helen before the ceremony began. Commander Price, he said, I wanted to thank you. Helen looked at him in surprise. Thank me? For what? Zrath's light flickered in patterns that Helen had learned meant contemplation. For showing me that justice and law are not always the same thing. For helping me see beyond my trauma. For giving me a chance to be part of building something better instead of just maintaining something broken. Helen extended her hand. Zrath touched it with his crystalline appendage. The contact was brief but meaningful. We all deserve second chances, Helen said. That is what the Concordat is about, redemption, growth, learning from our mistakes. Zrath's form brightened. I will try to be worthy of that chance. The ceremony was simple. Admiral Brooks gave a speech about exploration and cooperation. The Earth President talked about humanity's place in the galaxy. But the moment that mattered most came when Jacob's grandmother was brought to the stage. She was old, frail, but her eyes were bright and fierce. She wore traditional Choctaw clothing, carried a feather staff that had been in her family for generations. She spoke in her native language first, then in English so everyone could understand. My grandson did what our people have always done, she said. He honored a debt. He showed kindness to someone in darkness. He proved that one person's courage can change the world. This is not new for us. We have always known that the smallest act of compassion can ripple across generations. Today we see those ripples reaching across the stars. She turned to Helen. You saved my great-granddaughter. You gave her life. My grandson gave you freedom. Now you both go into the unknown together. Carry with you the lessons of those who survived, who endured, who refused to let cruelty break their spirits. Show the galaxy that hope is stronger than hate, that mercy is stronger than law, that love is stronger than fear. Helen felt tears on her face. She did not try to hide them. Jacob stood beside her. His grandmother blessed them both. touched their foreheads with her staff, spoke words in Choctaw that Helen did not understand but felt in her soul. The old woman smiled. "Go now," she said. "Find wonders, make friends of strangers, build bridges across the void. That is the purpose of all living things, to connect, to care, to create meaning in the chaos." The Unity launched that evening. Helen stood on the bridge as Earth fell away behind them, the planet where humanity was born, where she had grown up, where she had learned to dream of the stars. Now she was going back to those stars, not as an explorer from one world, but as a representative of many. The crew was busy at their stations, running checks, preparing systems, making ready for the jump to faster-than-light travel. Jacob stood at her right hand, ready for whatever came next. Casey sat at the helm, her hand steady on the controls. Speaker Vane occupied a corner of the bridge, its translucent form flickering gently. "Course laid in for the Andromeda sector," Casey announced. "The unknown regions, where no concordate ship has gone before." Helen took a deep breath. She thought about her journey, from ship captain to prisoner, from the darkness of a living grave to the light of freedom, from disgrace to hope, all because one man had refused to let injustice stand, had risked everything to do what was right. "Take us out, Lieutenant," Helen said. "Let us see what is out there." The Unity's engines flared to life. Space bent around them. Reality shifted, and they were gone, sailing into the unknown, carrying with them the hope that compassion could reshape the galaxy. That courage could overcome fear. That one act of kindness could change everything. In the weeks that followed, the Unity discovered 3 new habitable worlds, made first contact with 2 species that had been hiding from the old coalition, rescued a damaged freighter, stopped a pirate raid. Every day brought new challenges, new opportunities, new proof that the Concordate's ideals could work in practice. Helen kept a journal, writing down her thoughts, her experiences, her hopes for the future. One entry written late at night in her quarters summed up everything she had learned. She wrote it simply, without flourish. Just truth. I was buried alive in disgrace, sentenced to eternal darkness for choosing mercy over law. I thought my story was over, that my life had ended in that tomb on Tarthos 9. But a Choctaw warrior named Jacob Blackwater saw things differently. He saw a debt that needed to be paid, an injustice that needed to be corrected, a life that deserved to be saved. He came for me, pulled me from the grave, gave me back my future, but he gave the galaxy something more. He proved that rules are not sacred, that laws serve people, not the other way around, that compassion matters more than compliance. His act of kindness rippled outward, changed minds, changed hearts, changed the entire structure of galactic civilization. I learned something in that darkness. 3 years of silence and isolation taught me what matters. Not power, not order, not the approval of those in authority. What matters is the willingness to stand up for what is right, even when it costs everything, even when the whole galaxy tells you that you are wrong. Especially then, Jacob's ancestors survived genocide. They walked the trail of tears. They endured what should have killed them, and they taught their descendants that some truths transcend law. That family is not just blood. That debt and honor and kindness are the real measures of a person's worth. Now we sail among the stars, a crew of beings from a dozen worlds, working together, learning from each other, building something new. The Concordate is not perfect. Nothing created by imperfect beings ever is, but it is better than what came before. It values life. It recognizes that compassion is not weakness. It understands that the universe is too complex for rigid rules. I was buried alive in disgrace, but I rose again. Not as a criminal, not as a martyr, as a symbol of what we can become when we choose mercy over cruelty, when we choose hope over fear, when we choose to pull each other from darkness rather than leave each other in it. That is the lesson. That is what Jacob taught the galaxy. One person can make a difference. One act of kindness can change everything. We are all connected. We are all family. And we do not leave family behind. Helen finished writing and looked out her window. Stars stretched in all directions. Infinite possibilities. Unknown wonders. And somewhere out there, more beings who needed help. More injustices to correct. More chances to prove that compassion was stronger than any law. The Unity sailed on through the darkness of space. A light in the void. Proof that even in the coldest reaches of the galaxy, warmth could be found. That hope could survive. That one Choctaw warrior's act of kindness had changed not just one life, but billions. Helen smiled. She was no longer buried, no longer in darkness, no longer disgraced. She was free. She was home. And home, she had learned, was not a place. It was the people who refused to let you face the darkness alone. It was the family you chose, the bonds you built, the love you gave and received. That was what mattered. That was everything. The stars called to her. The unity answered. And the journey continued. One act of kindness at a time. One life saved. One hope restored. One future built. That was enough. That was everything. That was the legacy of the woman who had been buried alive in disgrace and rose again to change the galaxy.